Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Guts and Grind. We're excited that you joined us. Thanks for clicking. We have a great show for you today. My name is Sajin Abraham. I'm here with Siju Koshi. Siju, who are we interviewing today?
We are interviewing none other than Beau Guidry. Super excited about this interview. He just has a wealth of knowledge. I mean, in just all different types of assets. I mean, short term, long term. Even did Section 8, out of town. I mean, you name it. I'm super stoked, and I know you are too. So I'm really excited about getting this interview going.
You're listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin, making the real estate journey accessible to anyone.
All right, welcome back to the show. We are excited. We are going to be interviewing Beau Guidry. He is one of our friends here that actually is investing in real estate, and we are excited to hear about his story. Beau, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first, thanks. I'm honored to be on the podcast. Big fan of you guys. So thanks for having me on. Background, I come from an IT background, have a degree in computer science, and, started out, just from the ground up, breaking into the technology field. Finally latched on in the healthcare industry and worked there for some 20 years.
Yeah, it's funny because Saj, I think I kind of hinted a little bit to it, but me and Beau used to work together. It's how we kind of stayed in contact. But we had these discussions about real estate probably 20 years ago. Yeah,
Wow.
15 to 20 years ago, we were talking about.
No, that's awesome. It's cool because you see in 20 years what could really happen, right? And so those conversations can be, develop into actual things that we do, right? So I'm kind of curious, you were in the IT world, why real estate? Why did you think that that's the way that you should go? Is there any backstory on that, or why don't you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, it actually is. I had a real hard start getting employment in IT. If I would have known what I know now, I've never got a 4-year formal degree in technology. I always tell people that. But it just took a long time, and it didn't help when I actually graduated. It was like 2003, market downturn. Not a whole lot of opportunities for employment where people were going to give you on the job training. So where I invested in formal education, I always kind of felt like, hey, this just isn't stable. You hear about people getting laid off, the dot-com crashes. Technology is always my passion, but that just let me know that, hey, there has to be something else that can give you stability. I've always been into ownership. I want to own something. I want to own it all if I can. And I like the idea of, early on, I think I understood that, when you work for a living, your biggest expense is your home. That's your biggest cost of living. So if you can leverage that in a way to get ahead, then you can really reap the benefits of it.
I mean, it's awesome. It's awesome to hear that. And it's were there resources that you listened to or read or something like that? What was the thing about real estate itself to actually dive into it? Because what you're saying is on point, but I feel like there's a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too. It's you're in the atmosphere and you're kind of floating around and you're trying to figure out what to do with your life. You're trying to get your career started and all these things. And not everyone falls into what you just said. The realization is what I mean, right? Not everyone gets to fall into that realization of hey, cost of living matters and my expenses matter. And how can I offset this somehow? Right. So was there a trigger in your life or something like that kind of pushed you towards real estate, or was it just I'm on the hunt and then I stumbled upon it, or what did that look like?
Yeah, so it was two things. One, realizing how much money I was spending in rent, right? And I think everybody goes through that, right? You finally move out of your parents' house and you get your own place. And you're like, wow, it's expensive and it keeps going up. The other piece to that is one of my first business ventures was breeding American Pit Bull Terriers. Back then, it was the bully style of American Pit Bull Terriers, which they now refer to American Bullies now. But you really needed a yard for that. You can't, it's really tough doing it in an apartment. So I always wanted a house early on. I knew that I needed that to kind of help with, it was like a hobby because I used to breed and show, but it you really need some space. You needed a yard, you needed some land.
Yeah, and Beau, I know we talked a little bit before, but how did you kind of get started? And did you end up owning your first home first, and then you kind of transition into the rental market? Because I know, yeah, a lot of people you pay the rent and you see, hey, how much money is going out of your pocket, and you own nothing, right? So did you transition by purchasing a first home and then kind of like hacking your way into the rental market?
Absolutely. I looked into, I always felt like, hey, everyone should start with purchasing their own home first. That's the first investment. But shortly after that, I looked into investment properties and realized, how much you had to put down. It was 20%. And then I realized that, hey, the easiest way to do this is when you get ready to move to another home, then you just keep the property that you are already living in, and that's your first investment property. And to do that, you really need to live below your means. That's one of the strategies I use. And it's very tempting, human nature. Hey, we go out and buy the nicest house in the best neighborhood that we can buy, even if we don't intend to do it. When we start looking at the price sheets and talking to the builders, it just goes up and up. And I myself got caught in that also. And then I just realized, I said, you know what? And it was like right around 2008. And I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but it was right around 2008 and the housing market crashed. I saw the cost of properties continue to go down. So it was come fast forward like 2012, instead of buying that new construction, and my wife and I, were already building the home, and we had a dispute with the home builder. And actually, it goes, I think I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself here. It goes a little deeper. So my wife and I, we actually had problems conceiving. And we didn't know that until we were like working with the home builder to build, our next home. And I'd already bought my first home in 2006. So, thinking about the cost of IVF, not knowing how many times we would actually have to do that, I felt like it was really God talking to me, and that saying that, hey, don't spend all of your money on the nicest house that you can afford, because there are other things that come up. And if you really want to do real estate investing, you also need to have more cushion too. So we got in a dispute with the home builder, and started looking at cancel the contract, started looking at foreclosure homes. And we bought a foreclosed home in a nice, what I thought was a nice neighborhood, needs some work, but something that strategically I felt like if this is the last house I ever buy, I would be fine with it. It's enough room to grow with the family. If I have two kids, parents, in-laws come to visit, we're comfortable enough. And that's what we did. And
What was that in 2012? You said you made the move to buy that foreclosed home?
yes, that was in 2012.
Yeah, and you hit a couple great points, which I think apply really heavily in this market now, because a lot of people struggling now because the interest rates are so high, the prices of homes are so high, and I feel like a lot of the people that are trying to break into the home market, it's a struggle for them to even to buy the house that they're dreaming of, right? But you hit the great point of buy a home that's functional, right? Within, if it's even below your means, you're owning something, right? And then eventually when the markets go in your favor, you can always, right, either refinance that and then buy into a bigger, nicer home that will, meet your specs according to the times, like as the cycles kind of change, right? So that's actually pretty awesome. So from there, your first house, did you actually put it on the rental market, the one before the foreclosure? Is that kind of how you
I
handle that?
did. I did. So because the house was a foreclosure, it was cheaper. It definitely allowed us to keep the existing house that we were moving from, have more reserves to carry that on, which, I found out I needed. And we put that on the market and rented it. And the odd thing, I didn't realize at the time, but 2008 to like 2012, when the housing market was depressed, housing prices were down, but rent was up because a lot of the people that foreclosed, they couldn't move into apartments. They needed a house with multiple rooms.
Sure.
So there was a lot of people looking for single family homes to rent, and that really drove the price up.
So let me ask, like, so was the rental house like a happy accident because you were going to move and it just made sense, or was that the intention from the beginning? Where you're like, no, we are going to live in this house for a little bit, we're going to upgrade a little bit, and then we're going to make this into a rental, and that's our foray into being
Yeah,
landlords.
that was the intention, to always keep that rental property. But I think, in hindsight, looking back, that if I had not gone to and purchased a cheaper foreclosure to move into as the next house, I would have been stretching myself with it, keeping that rental and carrying the mortgage on that brand new construction with the higher taxes.
It's
So
it's
a little bit
it's
of both.
crazy how things happen in life, and like circumstances that might look kind of dim and stuff kind of shine a light on things in your life where you need to, like, oh hey, I need to force myself to build margin. And I feel like everything that you were saying was like, margin is important in your life. You need
Yeah.
space in your life to have breathing room to be able to make certain moves, and if something comes up, you
Yeah.
have the resources to be able to come in and take care of it, right? And so I think that's a great lesson for anyone listening that might be starting off. Don't dive off the deep end. Like, we're not trying to say don't be scared, but at the same time, be smart in your personal finances to know, hey, I have enough margin to float the note. Like, if I were to move and make my old house into a rental property, I have enough money to float the note until I get a tenant in place and all that good stuff. So valuable
Absolutely.
lessons, man. I think, and like, as we walk through these journeys and sharing these stories, I feel like it's valuable because someone else that's listening is probably going through that same situation, right? And so hearing you say it is a big deal, right? It's a big deal to say, all right, if he went through that and he made it out on the other side alive, like, I could do it too, right? So that's a great thing to share.
Well,
Yeah.
the one point I also want to kind of unpack a little bit more is the finances piece of it, right? So you did say, hey, we had to readjust the way we think, right, and kind of tighten our finances. Did you kind of have to sit with your wife down and say, hey, listen, we got to kind of tighten this stuff, our belt on some of these expenses, and this is kind of where we're focused, or kind of how did you handle that internally, or are you the
Oh, of
one that kind
course.
of
She wasn't with the plan at all. It's no, trust me, that was a hard conversation to actually, sit for hours and weeks, building, a nice new brand new construction, all the amenities, and then have, the conversation with your wife. Hey, baby, I don't think this is what we should do. I think we should go look at this foreclosure with holes all in the wall. And, it's she, yeah, she wasn't feeling that at first, but she did see the bigger picture. One of the things, and just to kind of give more details, it really was a domino effect of good decisions, because one of the things is that first home that I purchased, I bought it in 2006. This was right after Katrina, and that was right before the housing market bubble burst. And here it is. I'm looking to buy my first home, and I steadily see how expensive homes are getting. And I purchased that first house for 114,000, which doesn't seem like a lot of money today by today's standards, but this was 2006, so that was a lot of money back then. And I swear, 2 years later, by 2008, that same house was only worth like $77,000. I was like, wow, man, I watched housing prices climb steady where I didn't have enough money to buy one. As soon as I have enough money to buy one, they tank. But even that was a blessing, because what happened was my taxes went down. The Harris County assessor noticed the foreclosures in our neighborhood and kept reducing the appraised value of the home. So, this house that I was paying almost $1,100 for a month with mortgage, taxes, and insurance ended up getting as low as like $800 a month at one point with the escrow.
wow.
And
Oh wow.
yeah, we were in no rush to move. So my wife and I, we had good jobs at the time, no kids. So we used that as opportunity to save as much money as we could for a down payment on the next house. And as we were just watching the market, I mean, we didn't even talk about leaving, I think, until like another 4 some odd years. But buying that foreclosure, being able to save that money and buy a foreclosure, we were able to put 20% down and do it on the next home and do a 15-year mortgage.
Wow. And I would imagine there's this thing called lifestyle creep. And I think this would factor into that as well. Cause your cost was 1100 and it went down to 800. It takes a lot of discipline to not spend that margin, right? It takes a lot of discipline to be like, hey man, we're rich now, man. We got a little bit extra coin in our pocket. Let's go out to eat a little bit more. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. To have the discipline to tuck that away for the next house is very commendable. And I think that's a lesson that everyone could like learn from. But you said you bought a foreclosure, right? And I'm assuming you had to do some repairs and stuff like that. What was it? A house that you're able to purchase traditionally? Like you put the 20% down and go with a big bank and kind of do that? Or did you have to do hard money or like, what did that look like to actually get that purchase so you could still hold the old house and buy the new one and fix it up?
Right. It was a HUD foreclosure. I want to say, yeah, we did do a conventional loan because we did 20% down. We were able to avoid the PMI, and we had enough reserves to actually do the rehab ourselves. So that really helped, and it was all in an effort to keep the mortgage, the mortgage for monthly mortgage low as possible, and still do the 15-year term on it.
Yeah,
Wow.
and for those on the call, the PMI, basically the mortgage insurance for anybody that has a loan out there that's anything paid less than, I guess, 20% of the value of the home, the mortgage companies usually add a mortgage insurance on there. So that's what PMI is. So if you pay 20% down, they won't charge the mortgage interest.
Yeah, it's 200 some odd $1,000 house. I think PMI is like, it can vary anywhere between like $75 to $150 extra a month. So it
Yep.
really
Month, yeah.
is,
It's not chump change, like
yeah.
every little bit you could save and the more that's going towards your equity is always ideal, right? So man, that's awesome. And so was it a journey? I don't know if this is getting too personal, but was it a journey to get your wife on board with this plan? I mean, because it seemed like you had the idea, hey, we're gonna buy a house, live in it for a little bit, move on to the next one and make that a rental. And then like the whole shift of like, hey, we're buying this brand new build and all this stuff, and that kind of, hey, that's not gonna work out. So we're gonna get this foreclosure. Like, was it pulling teeth or was she on board or
Oh
like what
yeah.
did that look like? How'd you convince her?
Oh man, yeah. She didn't like me for a while. She and I get it. It was a huge emotional shift. Look at this brand new beautiful neighborhood that we're going to every day, talking to the home builder, doing specs, picking things out, media room, 3-car garage. Oh, it's everything we want, and then saying, hey, I don't think, I don't like the way this is playing out. I think there's something else here that God is telling us we need to go a different direction, and it'll be better for us in the long term. She did ultimately see the bigger picture. She grudgingly went along, but hey, as long as she went along, and
Yeah.
then after a while she got into the place and realized, after and we didn't have to put like 50 grand in the rehab or anything, just to get it livable and decent. I think we put like maybe 15 grand in, 15 to 20 at the most. She soon saw, the value in that. Like, man, we saved a lot of money, not only for the on the property itself, but the taxes that we pay, because it's a lower tax rate versus a new construction. So she was well on board, and thankful that I came up with the idea, and we all went along with it.
So, Bo, to fast forward, so you guys have since then, have you expanded on your rental portfolio? And if so, what kind of properties have you purchased and where, if you don't
So
mind?
I got into Airbnbs, short-term rentals in New Orleans. So I had the long-term rental in the house that we moved out, and that was a rocky start at first, but it smoothed out, and we had a great long-term tenant there for a while. And then I got into short-term rentals, Airbnbs, and I was really just leasing them at the time, getting a feel for it, learning what the market is like. And I realized how much higher the margins are with Airbnbs at the time. This was maybe 2014, 2015, I think. And I got up to 3 properties as a lease. But in New Orleans, the short-term rentals, the laws around it and the jurisdictions are constantly changing. So the building that I was leasing from, we had to move out of there. And by then I had enough knowledge to understand how to run and maintain short-term rentals, and research the laws to understand what kind of permits I need to do it. Bought a condo right at the edge of the French Quarter where I could get a full-time short-term rental commercial license. And from there, I bought a fourplex. In that, I just do long-term renting.
What made you shift into the Airbnb space? So 2014, I assume that's Airbnb was very new at the time. How did you come about the idea of, hey, maybe that's a good opportunity? And it sounds like you kind of did the whole Airbnb arbitrage, right? You just started leasing first and then using that as a
Right.
segue.
Right. That's exactly it. Yeah, I had some people that I knew that were actually doing it and highly recommended it. It was a big thing in New Orleans at the time. What still kind of is. A lot of people soured on it because of the local municipalities changing a lot of the laws. But yeah, that's how I got into it. And that's why you have to network. You have to talk to people, see what works, what doesn't. And then at the end of the day, you have to, take a gamble, roll the dice on it.
Can I ask, the rolling the dice thing? Like, I get that, but like, how long did it take you to say, or what level of convincing did you need for? Because you said you had friends that did it, right? And so were
Mhm.
they willing enough to share, like, hey, this is how much I'm making, or this is how, like, this is exactly how I made this happen, and you could do it too? Or just like, oh yeah, I'm doing it. Like, what was the level of confidence you needed to actually dive in? Because the arbitrage game, like, so personally, I'm only used to doing long-term rentals, and I know that there's a lot of money to be made with this short-term rental game, but I'm just not confident enough. So like, what did it take for you to get, to push over out of the long term, or not even out of the long term, but like add that into your game plan?
Yeah, so it was actually a relative that
Oh,
was
okay.
doing it. So I had a level of confidence in what they were saying. They did share some numbers with me, and he was a relative that I knew did long-term renting also, and he was saying, hey, compared to long-term renting, the short-term renting is much more lucrative. So that really, gave me a sense of confidence, but also a partnership, because especially as something like short-term rentals, things can change very quickly. And to minimize the risk, partnerships are really good, because if something happens, the city shuts you down, says, hey, we don't allow short-term rentals in this building, or the building management decides, hey, we don't want to do this anymore. There's a lot of upstart costs that you can lose. So I have a good friend that I pulled in, said, hey, do you want to do a partnership on this? We start with one, see how it goes, if there's any money to be made. And he was like, sure, someone I trust. And we went forward. The first one was good. And then, we decided to build up to 3 from there.
That is awesome. That's so cool. When you were doing this arbitrage, is this something that you specifically talk to the landlord? Are you saying, hey, this is our intention, this is exactly what we're going to do? Because I'm assuming you're leasing the property from a landlord, and then you
Right.
furnish it. And correct me if I'm wrong, you lease it, you furnish it, and you put it on Airbnb or other platforms, and then you just manage it essentially, right? And so is
Right.
there a conversation with that landlord ahead of time, or do you just say, hey, I'm renting it, and whatever I do with it is what I do with it? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. So back then, I don't even think people would use the term Airbnb arbitrage back then, right? And it definitely wasn't as formal as it is now. The building that we were leasing from, it was really geared to people doing short-term rentals. I mean, they had lock boxes throughout
Oh,
the entire building. I mean, hardly anyone that actually leased there actually lived there. It was in the French Quarter. And they didn't have any local laws about short-term renting at the time. And the city really started cracking down on that and putting things up. So really, it was a conversation with the management, but knowing that the property allows it, and as long as, hey, you're not late with your rent, you keep up, you don't cause any problems, that they're not going to have a problem with you.
Gotcha. And so, in your opinion, what's your feelings on? Because like, if it felt like there was a good wave of Airbnb, now things are cracking down, so the game is a little bit different. Do you still think that there's meat in the bone in short term rentals, or is that something that's kind of fading away? Like, what's your personal opinion on that?
It's definitely maturing. It's maturing in any industry that matures. I think there's still opportunity there. It's just that, the people operating in it have to grow with it. Markets are different. New Orleans, to me, the safe bet is acquiring commercially zoned real estate. Those have the best zoning for permits where you can operate it full time. You don't have to have a homestead exemption or live on site. Houston, the laws are really liberal about, where you can Airbnb or short-term rental. And it's the state or, your counties. I don't think they really have any laws to it, but they kind of let the HOAs and the more local jurisdictions deal with it. And because of that, there's a lot more Airbnbs in Houston at the moment. And I think we saw a wave right after COVID kind of subsided with the YouTubers going online saying, hey, this is how you do it. There's a how-to video and it's great, right? Everybody can jump in, but the floodgates open, and I think the Houston market got saturated. And when that happened, you saw a lot of people get in, and then a lot of people trying to get out. They're trying to sublease to you or sell their furniture. I'm part of several groups, and I haven't done any Airbnb in the Houston area yet, but I've seen that some people that I think were more established and kind of knew the strategy around it and saw things change and were able to adapt. I think they're still making money. But I think there's a lot of people that got hit hard in Houston. And then people are always in New Orleans, it's always a struggle just because of the permits and the zoning and the way the city chooses to enforce or not enforce.
So, are you still in the short-term game in the New Orleans area, or are you kind of pivoting, or with the way the markets are? Because obviously, I think you alluded to a little bit. The market's being saturated with a bunch of Airbnbs. I think that's happening across the board, right? Because there's this whole wave of YouTube influencers and all that are bringing people online. But are you still kind of going down the short-term route in New Orleans, or have you kind of pivoted strategies?
So I'm still bullish on short-term rentals in New Orleans, but for commercially zoned real estate, the problem is there's just not a whole lot of viable commercially zoned real estate out there. It has to be in a desirable area. There are a few things that I'm looking at and working on from that perspective. But during COVID, I quickly realized I couldn't go all in on Airbnbs because that property got hit hard with, the lockdowns. I mean, New Orleans is all about being around a crowd and, a festival, Mardi Gras. So during those lockdowns, I mean, we didn't hardly have anybody coming through. And it wasn't immediate, so it was good. And I had reserves to kind of last me, but it did get to the point where I was in the red, for more than several months before we built income again. But it made me realize that I had to diversify my portfolio. I was just coming off of a new construction bill, ground up construction, just buying a lot, a piece of land, and subcontracting with a builder to build a spec home and selling it. And that went okay. I learned some things from there, and I was kind of, weary. Kind of, the house was for sale right when the pandemic kicked off, so everybody was kind of didn't know what to expect. But as we know, it eventually came back around, and it started pricing wars for houses. But I ended up selling the house kind of right before that. But I did realize that, I want the steady cash flow. And during that time with the eviction moratoriums, the people that did the best were the ones that had like Section 8 rentals, the government money coming in. And that's what prompted me to buy a fourplex. And I take Section 8 on that because I just want that safety net of knowing that money, that rent is going to be paid every month.
That's that fourplex you said you bought in New Orleans, right? I believe after the Airbnb arbitrage, right?
Right.
Okay, and do you still have that? And I assume you're still kind of doing long term with that.
Yeah. Yes, that's a long-term rental.
So just to recap, so you've done single family, long-term rental, you've done Airbnb arbitrage, You've done multifamily. And so are we missing anything? Like you've got a good range of things that you've been doing. Like that's a great amount of experience to be able to like have under your belt.
You built
Yeah,
a
so
spec home too, by the way.
yep, ground
Oh,
up,
you built
respectful
up a spec
spec.
home.
Yeah.
And
Yep,
so and that was a built up and flip, right? Is that what that was?
correct.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
That's
great, dude.
awesome,
That's
Bo.
like,
yeah.
can you expand a little bit more on that? Like, what gave you the idea to buy a lot and build? I mean, I could see the reasons why, but personally, man, that sounds very intimidating. What's the
Yeah,
story behind that?
yeah, it was. So the deal with that was, I was still working full time, and fix and flips, they can take a lot of time. You have an existing house, but you really need to be there for the contractors, make sure work is happening, make sure people aren't stealing out of it. That, I didn't want the headache or the time that would take. So I decided to purchase a lot. And then here, a lot of my investing has been in New Orleans actually. And I've saw the property values just keep climbing. And I think that's what attracted me to invest there. So I bought a lot at a auction. And even though it was an auction, one thing I realized, like, man, I don't think these prices are any different than what things would sell on MLS. It was kind of, during the time where things were still crazy price. I mean, I think this was like 2014, I think maybe, or 2016, 2015, 2016. My dates are kind of getting off, man. They're kind of running together. But I purchased that lot, and I didn't start building on to maybe like a year later. And that property, I knew that if I just get a home builder or a construction company a contract to build a home on an existing lot and sell it, there's money to be made where I wouldn't have to be so hands-on. And, I'm just letting my money work for me, basically.
What did that look like? I mean, did you negotiate a flat per square footage, I guess, build price, or was it just a full on like build price that they said, hey, it's going to be a 1,500 square foot home. This is the price. And then
Oh
you're
man,
hoping that,
we went back and forth and so many times with the builder trying to get. I took the approach of just like me as a consumer going to buy a home in a subdivision and saying, hey, this is a lot I want it built on, give me this floor plan, this model. Like I wanted it all in writing. What are the floors going to look like? Or what if I can't choose from a sample you have here? Well, tell me what is my floor allowance, and then tell me how many square feet I have to cover, so I know, like, give me a square foot allowance so I can go and look in Floor and Decor and pick something out. Tell me what kind of appliances it has to be in the contract, all the little details, finishes, countertops. And the builder I worked with, they were really kind of dragging their feet in it. They didn't want to put that in writing because, I felt like they didn't want to do it. They were playing hardball because they didn't know what their costs were going to end up being. And that would have been a way that they can kind of weasel out of things, I felt like. But I held them accountable to it to say, no, I'm not moving forward until it's all in the contract. That's why it kind of took a very long time before we started construction. But I will say this, I went with a larger, probably more expensive builder that does commercial and residential and had been in the area for a very long time. And actually had a reference, that same relative that had them do some work. They were not the cheapest, but my thinking was, if something goes wrong, they're a larger established company that they can eat that cost versus me, or versus just abandoning the job. And then that would really sink me. And that's what happens a lot. You may get a smaller company that, has a better price, or they're nicer on the phone and you talk to them and you work with them. But when something goes wrong, they just can't take the financial hit. And what happened, and this was a kind of interesting story. This was right around the time, are you all familiar with the Hard Rock Hotel in New Orleans on Canal Street that collapsed?
No.
we
Yeah.
know about the hard drive, but I didn't know it collapsed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Hard Rock, they're building a brand new hotel right there on Canal Street, which is right on the edge of the French Quarter, right? And it's right around where my Airbnb is. And they were like, I get thinking about halfway through the construction, and the whole building just collapsed, killed a bunch of people. And with something like that, the first thing you think about is permitting. Okay, where were they at in permitting? Who was doing the inspections? Because obviously something wasn't stable, something was missed. Well, when that happened, the city of New Orleans swooped in and started enforcing, the inspections and for permits very strictly, and making sure that they were enforcing everything on the books. Well, in Orleans Parish, that's what the parish, the predominant parish in New Orleans, they started enforcing a permit to create a driveway. And there was just some kind of crazy rule about the way a driveway had to be curved around a fire hydrant that was within 10 feet or something like that. Well, the home builder, who's been operating New Orleans for decades, never pulled a driveway permit, all of a sudden got told by New Orleans City Permits, hey, you poured that driveway before you got a permit for it. You need to redo it. And they had to manipulate it and cut around it. I mean, it came out the way it came. I wasn't pleased the way it looked at all, but I ended up getting in a dispute with the builder because they were trying to make me eat the cost on that because we couldn't get a certificate of occupancy until it got addressed. But I said, no, I'm not going to do this. Hey, man, it's your job to pull the permits. Know the permits, pull it, and hey, I hear it. They're enforcing something they've never enforced before, but if it's on the books and that's what they're holding you to, I'm not eating the cost on this. They ultimately went forward and redid the driveway, and they took the financial hit on that. So I think it was good decision going with someone that was more established. And even though they were still kind of a pain to deal with, we worked it all out.
Was it a profitable venture at the end of the day when you're talking about when you sold it all in? You think it came out on
It
top?
was, and I learned a lot. So I made about $10,000 on it. That wasn't bad to say that I didn't have to be there. I didn't have to probably, do anything physically. I could still work a full-time job that was well over 40 hours a week. But I had someone break in and steal copper.
Oh,
And yeah, and I was thinking, oh, copper was going to cost me an extra 1,000 or whatever. No, it was like, hey, it was going to be like 15 grand. Or I think it was
oh,
like 15 to 20 grand because of the damage that they did. So I'm like, what? Okay, so hey, I have insurance. Great. So I filed an insurance claim, and the insurance denied it, stating that, and I had builder's insurance. They stated that they didn't know this was investment property. If I planned to live in the property, then it would be fine. They would cover it. I was like, what?
yeah.
I,
Oh,
I I never heard of such, and I was like, and so I called my agent at the time, and he told me, he was like, all you had to do was tell him that you were going to live in it. Like, what? Look, man,
yeah.
look, hey, all you had to do is sell me the appropriate insurance, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I got into another big dispute about that. Long story short, I had a file with the state of Louisiana Insurance Commission, and they told me to file with the insurance agent's insurance company, their insurance, as a claim. So the insurance company came back and they said, hey, we think that both you and the agent are responsible because you signed a document stating that something of the such that it wasn't investment property or something. They send you these long documents when you're signing and agreeing to the insurance. And I'm looking at the numbers. I look at the fine print. I usually do, but somewhere buried in it, they had something stated about me not being an investor or something, or planning to live in it or something, right? And they said, based on that, they felt like I should have known, but the agent should have done the due diligence to specifically ask me that to know the difference and make sure that he wasn't selling me insurance that didn't cover me. So they said they would pay me half of the payout, which worked out minus the deductible because I talked to lawyers and they were telling me that I had to pay them 25% of whatever I'm awarded, and it allowed me to keep going. So long story short, sometimes things are supposed to be easy. They don't end up that easy, but you just kind of have to stay resilient and keep working through them.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, you've had a wealth of experience, man. Like you've had a lot of bruises along the way, but it seems like it's still a worthwhile endeavor. Like, if you don't mind me asking, you've done all these different types of real estate deals.
Oh,
Which
wait,
one
just
is
to
your
answer Steve's original question,
Oh,
it
sorry.
had that whole fiasco with the insurance and the copper theft not happen, the profit would have been twice. I would have probably made $25,000 profit as opposed to 10.
Oh, wow, wow. That's I mean, but to still walk away with some profit, that I mean, that's great. But it's even with that big hit, like that's crazy.
Right.
So yeah, I was gonna ask, with all of the strategies and methods that you've done in real estate, which one is your preferred method? Which way is the best way of doing it in your opinion?
I'm still trying to figure that out, man. It's no, really, I think for anybody to be successful, they have to diversify. You can't be a one-trick pony. I like Airbnb. I like the high profit margins, and they're usually in nice areas, highly desirable. But I don't like being that vulnerable to pandemics. Maybe we'll never see another pandemic
Right.
again, but in our lifetime. But I don't know that. I'm still feeling, the pinch of the last pandemic. I like Section 8 rentals too, man. I tell you what, a lot of people talk negative about Section 8 and, oh, it's not worth the problem, the kind of people you deal with. And of course, there can be some casualties, but so far my experience has been good. I tell you what, there's a lot of people on Section 8 that are used to landlords or property managers not respecting them, not maintaining the property like they should. And that creates tension. And, the tenants I talked to and the applicants, they were just really thankful, for a property manager or landlord that's actually repairing things, providing a nice, clean place to live. And to me, that's fulfilling.
We talk about it all the time, Saj and I, and you hit it right on the nail, Bo. It's it's a two-way street, right? A landlord and a tenant, right? So you're providing a service, they're paying for a service, right? And the expectation should be the same on both sides, right? Like, we give you the property in a certain condition, we expect it back in the same condition. And I think you're right. Like, in human nature, right? If you respect each other, right? That respect goes across both ways. And they're more willing to pay the rent if the property's taken care of, if the property's in its best condition. And so I completely agree with you on that. And that goes home, because that's for anybody that actually is going to try to get into the rental game.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like it's I know it's easy to make this like a house business, like we're dealing with real estate, but it's actually a people business, right? And if you take care of your people will take care of you. I've had a Section 8 tenants in the past as well, and I've had great experience with the actual tenant. The tenant it's herself, like she was amazing. She kept the house clean, very respectful. Everything was so good. But I did have hiccups with the actual government side of it, like getting it approved to become Section 8. Once you get over those hurdles, it's actually pretty awesome. Like, I mean, it's a great experience once you get over those hurdles of becoming qualified to be Section 8 housing. But
Yeah.
oh my gosh, it was like pulling teeth. I mean, I have war stories from that, but yeah, I agree with you, man. Like, I think the tenants get a bad rap. Like, people have, like for some reason they have a bad connotation of Section 8 tenants, but the people are people. Like, they want a good house to live in, they want a safe place. I mean, we're all the same, like we all want a good
Right.
place to live. And if you provide a good product, they'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And there's always outliers everywhere, right? But I mean, I think it's fair to give people a chance.
What's your goal for the next 1 to 3 years, real estate wise? I mean, is it to keep increasing doors, purchasing more property? What's the goal here?
Yeah, I would like to buy another multifamily property in a nice area in New Orleans, somewhere where my wife and I can maybe retire, or just, maybe when the kids graduate, we go live out there or stay there, summers, somewhere that we can actually live and, pay off. And, I like the idea of multifamily because you look at the cost of living per unit, it's much lower than single family. So I'm a big believer in the power of multifamily. And in New Orleans, there's a lot of multifamily. In Houston, not so much, but they do exist. But, something like 4 units and up to get the cost down, and something that I could just pay off long term. If it, I don't like buying property, even if it's nice. I don't like buying property that doesn't cash flow. That's my golden rule, because I feel like my property should take care of me if I ever got in a jam, not me taking care of the property because I'm doing so well to keep it afloat. And don't get me wrong, a lot of other people, they break even and they turn around, they're able to sell said property, at $100,000 profit in only a few years. We just, that's the kind of market we've been in. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't want to roll the dice on that being it. So I like to buy things that cash flow, and if it's somewhere that I would actually like to live, that's my ideal next long-term property that I buy.
Nice, nice. Okay, well, I got another curveball for you. All right, let's say you lost it all. Like you got this portfolio right now, you lost it all. You still have the knowledge that you have right now, but you lost all the properties somehow, whatever. You only had $1,000 to start it all over again. What would you do? What would be your first step with that $1,000 to get back on track in real estate?
Man, can you do anything with $1,000 in real estate, man? I mean,
That's why it's a curveball.
oh God, man, I'd have to go get another job. I tell you what, I mean, and I don't know if you need more than $1,000 to do this, but I would definitely house hack. Live in a property, a multifamily property that had, they can take everything away from you, right? Financially, but what they can't take away from you is experience and knowledge. So I know how to manage a property with long-term tenants, short-term tenants, Airbnb, whatever it may be. So I would house hack. I would buy a property where I could just live in one unit almost for free and, have the other units pay for that property, just try to build up from there. Yeah.
Good answer. That's a good. You know what? You passed. That's a good answer.
It's one of the methodologies that are just, I'm telling you, anybody can do that, right? It's you buy and you have somebody else float your mortgage for you. It's I'm telling you, it's even in this market. I think that's the one method that will work in almost any market. I don't care if the interest rates are high, interest rates are low.
It is. And I think a lot of people are intimidated by it. I made a comment that, hey, I know how to manage property, so I feel comfortable doing it. But in the age of YouTube, I mean, you all's podcasts, right? I mean, I know you all talked about it. Like, no one should feel like you don't have the tools to actually learn it and go in there knowledgeable, even though it's your first time. 20 years ago, that wasn't a thing, If you didn't know somebody that was like really mentoring you and telling you how to do it, then you're going in blind. But I think there's a lot of resources in the digital age.
I totally agree. I mean, like the amount of, like you said, it's right at our fingertips. There are many times I don't really do repairs or anything like that anymore, just because, just for scaling purposes. But when I was in the nitty gritty of it, like there's a lot of times where I'm at a property and I'm YouTubing how to fix a toilet or how to replace a faucet. You know what I mean? And I'm just watching a video and then I do it immediately right there. Like it just takes effort, and I think that's what it is. Like, I mean, you have to be willing to get a little dirty and figure it out, like, like spend the time to do it. And I feel like that's the hope for this, right? Like, even if you're not getting in the nitty gritty and like fixing plumbing or changing electrical stuff or whatever, being willing to dive in and try out real estate and, learn as you go, right? Like build a plane as it's flying, right? So like it's invaluable, but it takes a lot of guts to do it.
Guts and grind, baby. Another last curveball for you is, how can people connect with you? Is there a preferred social media that you kind of hang on, or an email?
Yeah, call me directly or email below the link. I love talking real estate to people. I believe in the power of sharing knowledge. I've started several different businesses, ventures, and kind of learning my way, and even, in the professional world. And you run across people that don't share anything, people that just give you a little bit. And then there's people that's an open book. They're telling you the good, the bad, the ugly, everything. That's me. I'm an open book. I'll tell you everything. I'll tell you the losses, the lumps, the challenges, what worked for me. And I'll be realistic, just because it didn't work for me doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. Or if I chose to go a different direction. So I enjoy talking to people that truly want to learn and gain knowledge, and they're on this journey to build real estate wealth. hey, I enjoy sharing everything I know, and I find that as a form of giving back, for the people that share things with me.
That's awesome, man. Like we're all about that as well. As you know, like, we're doing this for that purpose because I feel like there's a lot of people that just got rich quietly and I understand it. Like I'm not trying to knock anybody for doing that, but I feel like there's a lot of wealth to go around. And so we're by no means saying that we're the experts and you have to do exactly what we say. But the idea is like, hey, if we share our story and if you resonate with our story, maybe you could learn something from it. Maybe you could grow it even bigger. Like who knows? Like you could do anything. Like it's limitless really, but like if we don't share it, like it's invaluable, right? So we'll definitely grab that information from you and put it in the show notes. I think we're going to wrap it up. Beau, thank you so much for just joining us and sharing your wealth of knowledge, man. Like it was great, man. I really appreciate it. And everyone that's watching, make sure you subscribe and comment. We want to hear your comments. Let us know your thoughts. If you have any input as well, just throw it out there. But once again, thank you so much and see you on the next one.
Take care, guys.
Well,
Thanks for listening to Guts and Grind with Siju and Sajin. Be sure to tune in next time.